welcome to the Pipeline and People podcast powered by Versorix, the show where boutique firm leaders trade less admin for more advisory. Each week, we share actionable tactics to keep your client pipeline full and your team performing at its best. I'm your host, Jaden. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Hala Kaaki, founder of WaterBear Sciences. Hala is a regulatory strategy advisor and former preclinical scientist. Thank you for joining us today. Could you kick us off with a quick look at your background and kind of what sparked the launch of WaterBear Sciences?
Sure. So my background is actually in cell and molecular biology. So I started off very much as a scientist. I've always worked in startups and worked on kind of building something from the ground up. I decided really to move to my own company and start WaterBear Sciences because, ironically, for this exact reason, from wearing many hats. So while I was in that biotech space and kind of really building up those companies, I ended up taking on a role in regulatory affairs and helping to make sure that drugs and basically our campaign was moving at pace and basically conversing with the FDA. And so from there, I decided to open up my own company to help other small businesses, other companies that would be struggling with this kind of gap for them.
Okay, amazing. So could you tell us more about kind of your role and how it fits into the bigger picture at WaterBear?
Yeah, so that depends, I guess, on the timing, right? So when I first started this role, it very much was very still is very client centric in some ways, but I was playing a much more active role in kind of this day-to-day activity with the clients. It was really built on kind of my working capability. So what can I do? How much can I do? And it wasn't a very robust system, I'll put it that way. But as we continued and we expanded a little bit more, and I ended up getting some help as well, bringing on other people, that shifted dramatically.
How many people are you?
So we have 2 on the US team, 2 on the UK team. So I'm currently in the UK bringing WaterBear Sciences to the UK on a separate but adjacent, I would say, project. So basically, WaterBear Sciences in the US will focus solely on the regulatory affairs and helping these small businesses. And then WaterBear Sciences in the UK is actually more focused on innovation and creating a software that would aid these clients, especially ones who are in kind of these novel drug, working with very novel modalities of drugs to assess their compound before they even reach clinic. So,
Okay, amazing. So you're on that side then with the software and the innovation.
I am, and that's one of the big ones. I kind of had to. I never thought I would have to learn programming the way I've had to learn over the last the last little bit here. So.
Yeah. So what does a typical day look like then? Switching between kind of the software development and BD delivery.
So it really ranges because, again, depending on, so if I'm really focused on working for a client, I've realized that there's quite a bit of an overlap where pretty much there's not any specific skill set that I have that isn't going to somehow help my client, whether it's on the programming side, whether it's on, just my regulatory affairs experience or biotech experience, just because I'm able to use that and leverage that as tools for the client. So I would say day to day, I kind of end up doing quite a bit of everything. I can tell you my computer hates me because it's running way too much all the time. And it's probably a little bit confused. And I would take that as a good sign. If you're confusing your computer on what it's supposed to be doing, that's probably, you've got your hat, you've got your, multiple hats on. So
Yeah, for sure. Is that where you thrive? Or, in a dream world, if you could hand some stuff off, what's like the area that you would want to focus on most?
yeah, so I want to hand off the right things. I think that's the most important piece of it. And so what I do like to do is make sure that we do have certain protocols and pipelines in place. I'd say that's kind of one of the biggest things that I learned during my entire journey is that not to have to find everything out in real time. Like, you should always be enhancing your workflow. And so that's really one of the things that I focused on is now, instead of just doing something, for example, for a client or working on a particular aspect of the program, I try to see how that can make every single day a little bit easier, whether it's for me or it's going to help my team, because I do want to leverage my team to the best of their abilities. I don't want them sitting around doing grunt work, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So then what do you think is working well and what is most frustrating about, you having to wear all of these hats?
I think the most frustrating piece is that, I guess, when you're a founder, especially when you're a new founder, you know that all of these things need to be done and they have to be done by someone. And so therefore it has to be you. The biggest challenge is that you really spend a lot of time having to do the research, doing the quality check, and especially if it's things like on the programming side, or it's on, for example, looking for specific infrastructure or software to use, having kind of like a customer client portal, those things that you kind of don't really take into account. I think when you start a business, you think, oh, I'm going to have a service and I'm going to provide the service. And it's not that simple because there's all of these other little aspects to set up that you kind of never anticipate in your day to day. But I'd say that would be the thing that I've had to kind of learn, that I'm going to have to do all of kind of those little admin type things as well. And those are things that really have to be done by you because it's your vision, it's your company. You have to set it up with the right tools, with the right with the right pipelines, with the right software. So you have to make those decisions regardless. It's usually a little bit easier if you have, the expert in that particular field next to you, but otherwise you have to become the experts.
For sure. But there also is the advantage of, you're in every aspect, you're doing everything, you know exactly what's happening, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the trade-off, I would say. So I don't feel that I would be able to kind of just shift back into more of that corporate world mentality after being kind of where I am, just simply because now you do have that mentality of I get to build this and I get to build this how I feel is like the best and most optimal way to get to achieve my goal. And it's not simply just following protocols or following whatever procedure. You're now making the protocols, making the procedures, determining how you think things should be set up.
Yeah, for sure. But then there's also a point where that becomes too much. Have you started thinking about when you'd like to hand things off? Is it revenue targets? Is it team size? What would be that kind of trigger for you?
I think I do hand some things off. I don't want to make it seem like I'm doing everything all the time. I do hand some things off, but again, it's a matter of, especially kind of in this new company role, I want the people around me to have an environment that makes them excited. I want them to feel as excited as I was when I started this company, when I was building it. I want them to feel that. So I don't want them bogged down with some of the other more tedious and just kind of irritating tasks to do. And I would say that as much as like I'm not focusing on a specific target as much as I'm focusing on, have I set my team up for success? And once that's the case, then I can, I want to be able to give them something whole. I don't want to send them off on kind of a wild goose chase. Like, could you figure out how to get this set up? So, but that's really, that I think is my main goal, is just to make sure that from the start, we're starting off on the right footing. And then once I feel like we have something sustainable enough where we can actually expand. So I would say the expansion is probably the point where I feel more comfortable handing off and putting certain people in roles for more of these tedious or smaller aspects of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. That makes sense. So where then do you see WaterBear being in 6 to 12 months in, ideal situation?
Well, ideally, I would hope that we would have a working prototype of this program. That piece of innovation, I think, is really important. And it's really important to why I wanted to start WaterBear, just because I do think that the drug discovery life cycle and how we kind of do, get drugs to market today is a bit inefficient. And so that's a big one. And so I'm hoping that in 6 to 12 months, we'll have a prototype of that program, and hopefully we'll have expanded at least enough that we have the clientele to kind of roll this out to and say, hey, what do you think of this program? And so it's kind of these two kind of balanced acts. So technically having two businesses that are kind of doing two different things, but operating in tandem. So,
Okay. And to get to that point where you have your prototype and it's launched, what's kind of one of the major challenges that would be holding you back, and how do you plan on solving it?
oh my goodness, you're asking all the hard questions.
That's my job.
So, yeah. So as far as the major challenge, I think, is I do think that as a team, we all work very well together and we can get it done. But I think the problem is then being able to take that and take it out into the world. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge we run into, is figuring out, who our audience is for this, who we need to put it in front of. As we are smaller, we have a set of clients. That's not really enough of a test, that's kind of the initial test phase. But we do need to have a much larger testing point as far as determining if the program is something that brings a significant enough value to other clients, other people who are working on really novel drugs. And so that's going to be the biggest challenge, is kind of finding those people to to pull that in.
Yeah, for sure. Having a strong ICP will get you very far.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, well, we dove into the software a little bit. That's great, but I want to kind of dial it back to the topic here of, wearing too many hats. So what moment kind of told you that the chief everything officer model may be breaking down? Or if it isn't, how long do you think you can keep doing everything?
So, like I said, that's kind of, there are little aspects that I do, but I do dole it out to my team. And I will say the model hasn't worked, I would say, for quite a long time. It was kind of built under this premise that we don't need to rest, or that it's under that old school mentality of just, as much as you work, it's as much as you gain. And I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe that makes sense for the modern world. And so it is important to really kind of leverage what's around you. And so I do focus a lot on looking for different tools, different ways to make small things easier. And if I can shell out to one of my colleagues, I do. But I would say that would be my first instinct as far as when it actually broke down was actually quite early on in the
Oh
journey.
no.
So, yeah.
Does your team kind of push back on that and like kind of signal that maybe you're stretched a little too thin, like asked to take on more stuff?
Yeah, actually, no, I have one particular I call my teammates colleagues, just so you know, but they're
Okay.
so my my colleague always kind of reaches out to me, and she always does it very politely. I always feel like that's how I know the breaking point is by how nice she is about it, and how personal it is,
Yeah.
like, hey, how you doing? What's up? Doesn't really bring it up directly. She's trying to ease her way in. I'm like, oh, okay, it's bad. Got it.
No. Yeah, yeah. And then do you notice that kind of all of that multitasking might weaken like long-term strategic planning?
Yeah, so that is something that I really did have to learn because I did come from that environment where it was very fast paced and very much pushing you to do basically just run your race, run it as fast as you can, and don't, you have to do everything. You have to be the one to accomplish everything. And I will say I've definitely enjoyed being able to kind of shift gears a little bit, but I have learned that I guess the key piece is to parse out the right things to the right people, also the right timing. So if it is something that needs my eye on it, that's fine. But I think a lot of the time too, we assume that we have to take something and kind of hold it and finish it, take it over the finish line. No, you don't. You can pass it to another person when it's the right time, when it's the right person. And if you just kind of don't have that same mentality of, oh, I have to do this, it's still as a company you accomplish and as a team you accomplish. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think a lot of founders kind of struggle with letting go a little bit, trusting that their team and their colleagues are capable of handling this. Would you consider yourself kind of like a control freak? Not to sound negative,
no,
but
it's okay. No, I think I definitely was when I first started this, but actually what really made me realize is it's really not, it's not really just my company, that all of these other people have a very significant vested interest in it, and they look at it as their company. Because if I don't reach out to them, or if I'm not asking for their help, if I'm not kind of, if I'm going more inward instead when I shouldn't be, they do a lot of that proactively. They reach out. They're like, "Hey, what is it that we need to do? Like what do you need? How can I take this off your plate?" And that's why I really do think it's definitely important to make sure you have the right people around you. But yes.
amazing. We are going to do a quick rapid fire, 3 minutes, give like a quick 30, 60-second answer for each question. And then we'll wrap up. I don't want to take too much of your time. Sound
Mhm.
good?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So, number one, what is the biggest myth about multitasking?
It doesn't work. No, it really doesn't. And I do envy some people who can kind of do it instinctively, where they don't feel the need to do 10 million things. But it doesn't really work to try multitasking. Either you need to set it up where something is running pretty efficiently without you having to put your attention. But I'm a firm believer in the fact that when you make a decision to multitask, realize that whatever you are doing is splitting your attention, splitting your concentration, splitting the quality. in some way. So if you're putting 70% of your time and energy, but you're also doing something else 30% on the side as you're kind of working through, you're not giving something your full attention. And I think if you choose to do that, that's totally fine. But it is a matter of making sure then that you know what deserves the hierarchy on multitasking, what deserves more time and attention than the other, because you are absolutely always going to be sacrificing some level of quality or concentration or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. What system do you have to kind of prioritize tasks?
So the way that I do it is I look, it's probably not the most intuitive way. But especially kind of in the age of AI and everything, I look and I say, does this exist somewhere already? Does the pipeline or the workflow or something exist, or is there somebody that I know that, instead of it taking an hour to 3 hours of my time, is this something that's 15 minutes to them? And I think that that's another thing that we really do need to kind of think about when we go to, when we go to do these kinds of things, because we look at it and we're like, oh, this is going to take so much time. And at least for me, I'm also of the mindset of like, I don't want to put this on someone else's plate, but for that person, it's not 4 hours, it's just 4 hours for you.
Yeah.
So it's 15 minutes and it's their bread and butter. Let them do it.
Yeah, for sure. Let them use their expertise.
Mhm.
Okay, on to the next rapid fire. What's one boundary every consultant should set this week?
I think when you're a founder, you are going to go through some really high moments and some really low moments. And I would say do not sacrifice the culture and the atmosphere and the environment that you have for your company for anything external. And that means including clients. Not that obviously you want to make the customer happy, you want to make the client happy, but I do think we're past that time, that idea that you can just burn yourself into the ground working as hard as you can. And I think that perpetuating that mentality is actually going to make it harder for us to get through this transition, which has to happen anyway. And so I think most founders, they think I have to build this business, I have to put 100% of the time and effort at my sacrificing my own well-being or sacrificing the well-being of those around me to some extent to build it. And I don't think that that's the right answer. And it also actually sets a precedent that you don't want. You'll slowly watch the atmosphere and the culture and the environment of your company shift in a direction you don't want. But if you are firm and you keep that boundary from the start, you make it clear how you want, people to interact with you and your employees and how they would basically continue to do business with you as a company, they actually respect you quite a bit more for it. And for those who don't, even if it seems like you really wanted that business in the moment, I can assure you it's probably more of a headache down the line.
I totally agree. It's very insightful. Thank you. Okay, finally, favorite lab science lesson that kind of doubles as a business lesson.
God, I will say so. One thing that, and this might be more from the biotech side and something I learned and brought into my company, a lot of the scientific aspects need to be highlighted. And so what we end up having, especially in the biotech industry, is you have people who are hyper specialized in the science, but they don't have the business knowledge. So you have this significant silo in knowledge. And because of that, people either have presentations or approach investors in a way where it's not really an investor presentation, or it's not something meant for an investor, it's too much meant for a scientist, or it's the opposite where it's so business oriented. They've really I would say watered down the science. And so I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned, and one of the things that I still say I do myself, but I do enjoy is doing a lot of those kind of investor presentations and learning how to position it. So there is an aspect, I think, of just learning that there's a way to present to almost anyone. It's just a matter of knowing who and how far and what they need to know in the moment. And so I would say make sure that there is always that balance going on. Don't just be a business man or woman or be a scientist. You need to be both. So that was the biggest thing I learned.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have any last pieces of advice for anyone that may be in a similar situation to you?
I would say to reach out to other founders and definitely have some support. It is a very difficult thing to start a company. And there are some really difficult times. And one of the best moments I've had during this journey, actually, I ended up reconnecting with a really old friend of mine that I knew back from when I worked for for a tech company. And what was interesting is he had also started his own company. And there is something that you get from connecting with other founders that you're not going to get from just even your loved ones or your family members. Obviously, they support you, they want to push you. But when I reached out to him and I was talking to him and I was kind of going through all of these headaches and all of these problems, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and it's so hard and I don't know. And on that moment that you're ready to give up, having another founder who genuinely knows what you're feeling and knows has been through that struggle, and to see them just kind of very casually be like, okay, yeah, it's Tuesday. Yeah, it's just this is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's okay, and it will pass. But that's the thing, is it will pass. And to get through those moments where you're thinking about, do I stop here? Is this, have I just failed? Like, do I call it a day? Or you say, okay, this is a moment that will pass. Other founders are the ones who are going to be able to really kind of keep you in that mindset and pull you forward.
Amazing. Hala, fantastic insights. Thank you so much. Where can listeners connect with you or, learn more about WaterBear?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website. We have waterbearsciences.com. Also, we do have a Twitter account, or X now, I guess. So you're welcome to connect with us either through waterbearsciences.com, which also has our phone number, emails, everything. You're welcome to reach out through there.
Okay. And of course, LinkedIn.
I think that one's the given.
Yeah. If today's conversation sparked any ideas, share this episode, tag Hala with your takeaway. Until next time, I'm Jaden. Thank you.